By the end of this video, you'll be familiar with all the top tips and must-knows for your first trip to the epic Lofoten Islands in Norway. From practical transport tips to more niche ones like where to get the best cheap ice cream. Now, in case you're new here, hi, I'm Christina from happytowander.com. And this channel is all about practical travel advice from someone who's been there, done that, so be sure to like and subscribe if that sounds like your kind of thing. I will say this video is very much geared towards specific tips on the Lofoten Islands, so I would recommend also watching my Norway travel tips video as well for some more general must-knows. Now let's get started with some Lofoten travel planning tips. First, to get it out of the way, maybe we should learn how to pronounce Lofoten and other popular destination names around the islands. Before you panic though, I will say you shouldn't worry. There's even variances on how Northern Norwegians versus Southern Norwegians pronounce everything, but as long as you give it a try and put in some effort and get it somewhat right, then you're all good. Lofoten is kind of my best approximation, and people seem to understand what I meant when I said that, so I would say roughly stick to that rather than Lofoten or anything like that. And of course, besides Lofoten, be sure to learn how to pronounce some of the other main place names as well. It is helpful to know, for instance, that this is pronounced as O, as in the village of O, and this letter is pronounced kind of like so like the U in burn, burn, Bit weird, but I hope that helps. I personally really struggled with planning my Lofoten trip when I didn't know how to pronounce any of the destination names, like literally none of the information I read stuck. So in case you have that problem as well, here is a rough approximation of how you would say the following names. This would be Svolvær, this would be O, this would be Reina, this would be Kabelvåg, this one is Leknes, and this is Henningsvær. Next, to make sure we're all on the same page, the Lofoten Islands, often just referred to as Lofoten, refer to a dreamy archipelago in northwestern Norway, famed for its craggy mountains, epic views, dreamy beaches, and adorable fishing villages. It's also fairly remote and high up north in Norway. In fact, it's located north of the Arctic Circle, which is how you get midnight sun, which is when the sun doesn't set for a period in the summer, as well as polar night, which is when the sun doesn't rise above the horizon during specific periods of winter. So on that note, the timing of your trip really is everything. If you're trying to decide when to visit Lofoten, then you should really keep in mind the different periods of the year to plan for, depending on what you're hoping to see. If you want to maximize your chances of northern lights, for instance, definitely visit between September and April. And if you're looking for midnight sun, then definitely visit between late May and early July. That said, unless you're coming just for northern lights or for winter sports, I would probably advise against a winter trip just because there are way fewer tourism services and the weather can be really unpredictable. And I will say, just as a warning, midnight sun is such a cool experience, but it does come with a number of unexpected nuisances, like your accommodation getting crazy hot because the sun just keeps coming in. Plus, many places aren't actually built with air conditioning. And most, from my experience, don't have full blackout blinds either, so it can actually be quite a challenge to sleep without an eye mask if you're sensitive to light. Now, in terms of how to get there, there are a few different options for arriving at the Lofoten Islands, each with their own pros and cons, so here's a quick review. First off, where should you fly into? Well, there are only two airports in Lofoten proper in the two largest cities. So Svolvær Airport and the Leknes Airport. Svolvær is often considered the gateway to the Lofoten Islands, and it is the largest town and administrative center of the Lofoten archipelago. Odds are you'll find cheaper flights to this airport as well, but if you do find a deal to Leknes, definitely go for it because it's only an hour drive between the two, and honestly, you're gonna end up seeing both during your trip anyway. Another alternative, and actually what we opted for, was to fly into Harstad or Narvik Lufthavn. This is often the cheapest option because more airlines actually go to this airport. Do note though that there's only 2 buses a day that connect it to Svolvær, so either plan accordingly or make sure you rent a car because the drive is really long, but honestly super stunning and worth doing if you have the time. In any case, as an overseas visitor, you'll likely transfer in Oslo or actually Frankfurt. As of May 2024, Discover Airlines will be doing direct flights from Frankfurt to EVE, so be sure to take advantage. It is also possible to take a ferry from Bodø, but that'll take longer, and apparently the ride is really choppy, so do with that information what you will. Now, in terms of building an itinerary, it is helpful to keep in mind that the Lofoten Islands do include hundreds of different islands and inlets, but honestly, you'll just be planning based on the towns and villages because most of the main points of interest are connected by bridges and ferries. So practically speaking, you aren't going to hear a lot of people refer to the specific islands individually so much as they do the different towns and sites on the islands, but it is still really helpful to know the names. So just out of these several hundred islands and islets, the main ones to note include Oostvoorge, which is the largest and most populated island in the group, home to Svolvær, which is the administrative center, Vestvoorge, which is located to the west of Oostvoorge, and this island is known for its beautiful landscapes and attractions like the Lofoten Viking Museum, Kimsøya, which is known for its beaches and the world's northernmost links golf course, Flokstadøy, which is an island located to the southwest of Vestvoorge and is known for its scenic beauty, including some very famous beaches, and Muskinsøy, the southernmost of the main islands and home to the iconic fishing village of Rhina. Now, in terms of where to go, the most common route is going from Svolvær to Å, stopping at Kabelvåg, which is the oldest town in Lofoten, Henningsvær, a really cute town known for its unique football field and nice shops, plus Rhina and other nearby villages like Hamnøy, which is home to some of the most iconic views in Lofoten. This general route is a really nice starting point of highlights, but if you have more time or want to get a bit more off the beaten path, my main tip is really just to get some more advice from local bloggers. One resource I really liked was 68north.com, and this is a website run by a Californian who now lives in Lofoten, and he's clearly very passionate about photography, so there are a lot of great visuals and a lot of really cool off the beaten path spots, so definitely check them out. Now, when it comes to where to stay, beyond photos, do be sure to vet accommodation very carefully for location, ideal vibe, and useful must-haves like a kitchen. Most accommodations will use epic photos of the surrounding landscapes with amazing northern lights and all these really nice enticing visuals that will definitely draw you in. But do remember, it doesn't matter how cute the color is on the outside when actually you're staying on the inside. So be sure to definitely scroll and check the different photos of the actual interiors before committing. Now, the best space for explorations will definitely depend on your mode of transport and also your priorities for your trip. If you're going just by public transport, then you'll definitely want to stay in a larger town that has transport links. So often the best options are considered to be Svolvær, which is more on the eastern side, which again has its own airport and is where many tours will depart from, and Leknes, which has its own airport and frequent bus connections. To be honest though, the bigger towns in Lofoten, while very convenient and offering a lot of modern amenities, aren't exactly the cutest or most charming in my personal opinion. So, if your goal in Lofoten is to have a really laid back and scenic trip and you don't mind having some trade-offs in terms of amenities and things to do, then some bases that I might personally recommend instead include Rhina and Henningsvær, which are both super cute and scenic while still being serviced by buses as well. Of course, if you have a car, you have plenty more options at your disposal, especially if you want to experience one of the more iconic accommodation options in Lofoten, which are these roorbua. These are super photogenic and colorful fishing huts that are quintessentially Lofoten. And many of them have now actually been converted into tourist accommodation, luckily for tourists like you and me. I will say these fishermen's huts are very, very cute, but many of them are actually fairly modest because, again, they were fishermen's huts. So keep them in mind as an option, but don't be surprised when they're not actually that fancy on the inside. In terms of larger hotels, they do exist in the bigger towns, but for the most part, if you are staying in villages, you will be dealing with smaller guest house type accommodation. Often these won't have many amenities that people take for granted, things like air conditioning, so definitely keep that in mind. It is worth noting though that if you're traveling as a group, many of the budget accommodation is often actually bigger houses and cabins with multiple rooms, so it could pay to travel with multiple people and share a house instead of trying to find a bunch of independent hotel rooms. And honestly, I do think you should book a place with a kitchen if you can, just because dining out in Lofoten is fairly pricey, so if you do it for every single meal, your budget will definitely be shot to pieces. So having a place where cooking is an option can really be a huge money and lifesaver. All right, now let's move on to Lofoten transport tips and getting around. First, do know that renting a car is definitely the best way to explore Lofoten. The distances once you get there are honestly really doable, with the quickest route from Svolvær, which is again considered the gateway to Lofoten, and Å, considered the end of the Lofoten scenic route, only takes 2.5 hours. And this road trip is the most common one, known as the E10 Scenic Route. As someone who has done this, I can attest that it is absolutely stunning. But based on my trip, there were also some nice parts farther up north that are worth considering as well if you have the time and want to get a little bit more off the beaten path. And having a car is of course going to be able to help you with this. If you want to do the trip with public transport though, that is of course possible, but do know that while buses exist here, they do mainly serve the local population for work and school purposes, so often the buses won't necessarily be bringing you straight to the most scenic points of interest, and they do also run reduced schedules on weekends as well. To look up timetables and buy tickets, the app that you want is called Ryza. And yes, if you get tickets through there, it is cheaper than buying it on board, so keep that in mind. Since I didn't take the bus, I'm just going to show you what the official Lofoten Tourism Board says for buses. So it says on here that there are capacity restrictions of 50% on routes longer than 1.5 hours. If the capacity gets full, a new bus will come. You can buy tickets in the app Billet Nordland just before entering the bus, since the ticket runs from when you buy it. Pre-ordering tickets is only possible at flybussen.no/the Airport Express. Now, for a more in-between option, there is something known as the Arctic Bus, which is a service made for tourists and runs from June to August daily. This is essentially a hop-on hop-off service that links Svolvær and Å, so quite ideal for tourism purposes, with English-speaking drivers and free Wi-Fi. But it is expensive, so be sure to crunch the numbers before you commit. Sometimes between a few friends, renting a car and driving might actually work out to be cheaper, which it was in our case, since we booked the car pretty early. Another thing to be mindful of though is that hitchhiking culture is actually pretty common around Lofoten. So be prepared for a few people to ask for rides. Or be prepared to ask for rides yourself, if that's an option that you want to consider. When you drive around, you'll often encounter hitchhikers who might approach you for rides, especially in busy areas like rest stops. So whether or not you go for it is of course up to your own comfort level, but do prepare yourself for this possibility if you are socially awkward like I am. Do note as well that ferries are a common mode of transport around Lofoten as well, and many are actually free. But this depends on the route, so just don't be surprised if Google Maps randomly directs you onto a boat at some point, because that can happen and it's honestly a nice little break. Now finally, let's move on to some Lofoten tips for once you arrive. First, do know that cards are accepted pretty much everywhere, so you probably won't need to bring much cash with you, except maybe a tiny bit just in case. There was, on my trip, maybe only 1 or 2 instances when we needed cash, and that was just to park in more remote areas through an honesty box situation, so yeah, really not too much need for cash, especially if you're paying in major cities or towns. Next, do keep in mind that dining in Lofoten can be expensive, but there are ways to save money by buying groceries and snacks from supermarkets, which honestly are a very fun cultural experience in this area. From my experience, every nice sit-down meal with an alcoholic drink would work out to be about 400 krona or more, so quite a lot. But there are some great ways to save on your food budget. As I said before, cooking for yourself makes a lot of sense here, as does getting snacks and supplies from supermarkets to make things like sandwiches for lunch. Especially since some smaller towns might have fairly limited options for food as well, it really does make sense to buy some groceries during your time in Lofoten. Weirdly, gas stations are a great place to grab a bite as well. Circle K was a genuine lifesaver during our road trip, with lots of tasty and filling hot food options like hot dogs and suspiciously good ice cream. I will say though, every time we did dine out, we really enjoyed what we had. Ingredients were always really fresh and high quality, so it's worth doing a few times, especially if you want to try some local specialties. Which I always do, so if that aligns with your travel style, let me know in the comments by commenting foodie. Now this brings me to my next point, which is that it's definitely worth splurging and trying some local Lofoten specialties while you're visiting. Some local foods to try include different seafood dishes. The most popular one is definitely anything with stockfish, which is this dried cod that you see drying on racks all around the different islands. I personally really love bacalhau, which is a tomatoey stew made with stockfish, but you'll definitely find stockfish prepared in all kinds of ways everywhere. Arctic char and klippfisk, which is another type of dried fish, is also very popular, as is Lofoten lamb, which is very well known. There's also various berries like cloudberry and lingonberry, so be sure to try them if you get a chance. And while not exclusive to Lofoten, I do also really recommend trying brunost, which is a brown cheese that is slightly sweet. It's a very popular Norwegian specialty and so delicious. Now in terms of alcohol, do know that alcohol is really pricey to buy here and also strictly controlled. Hard alcohol, for instance, must be purchased at a Vinmonopolet. which is a specialty store that looks like this. And some supermarkets will have beer, but alcohol sales are very restricted, so no buying on weekdays after 8 p.m, on Saturdays after 3 p.m, and not at all on Sundays. On that note, shops and supermarkets are usually closed on Sundays, though some in larger towns may be open for limited hours on Sundays, so be sure to keep an eye out. Very handy is that many of the larger supermarkets will actually have their hours printed on the outside of the store, so keep an eye out for that. And just as a final note, don't forget to be a respectful visitor. In other words, cleaning up after yourself, separating your recyclables, etc. Lofoten is an amazing area with so much pristine nature, and when you don't clean up after yourself properly, it really is so disruptive and rude. So pay attention to signs about what you can and can't dispose of in certain places, and always take any trash you bring on hikes or out in nature with you. All right, I hope that was helpful. Be sure to let me know in the comments if you have any more questions, and I'll be sure to see you guys next time.